What if I told you that scoring a perfect 100% on your internal quality tests is actually like the biggest red flag your organization could possibly face?
I mean, it sounds completely backwards. We're all conditioned from kindergarten to view 100% as the ultimate goal, right?
The proof that you did the work perfectly,
Exactly. But in complex systems, a perfect score usually means you've designed a test that is actively lying to you.
which is such a wild concept to wrap your head around. But it sits right at the heart of our deep dive today.
It really does.
We are exploring a detailed guide published back in September 2025 by Omer Simon. He's the CEO and co-founder of Validfor, and his piece is titled Metrics That Matter in Validation Lifecycle Management.
Now, I know validation lifecycle management might sound like a phrase designed to put you to sleep,
Yeah, a little bit.
but it's actually the framework used in highly regulated industries. Think pharmaceuticals, aviation, finance. It's how they plan, build, test, release, and maintain what are called GXP changes.
And GXP basically refers to those incredibly strict good practice regulations dictated by agencies like the FDA, right?
You got it. It's serious business.
Right. So it sounds like a pure, dense compliance manual. Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today is to take this highly technical framework and distill it into a masterclass on how you can measure the health of any complex system.
Any system at all.
Yeah, whether that's a massive corporate software rollout or just a really complicated personal project. We're going to walk through 13 critical key performance indicators or KPIs across 5 categories.
And we'll wrap up with a literal 30-day implementation plan that gets you out of the data swamp.
Yes. But before we get there, what's the main takeaway?
What's fascinating here is the source's primary warning right out of the gate. Measuring too much and constantly changing what you measure is the absolute fastest way to improve absolutely nothing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, massive organizations fall into this trap constantly. They measure everything, which effectively means they're measuring nothing.
Because it's just noise at that point.
Exactly. Validation isn't a one-off task. It's a continuous, repeatable system. And if your metrics aren't stable, well, your system isn't stable.
So before we even look at a single number, we really have to establish the ground rules of how we choose them.
Who'd you do?
Because the author is adamant that bad metric design ruins the whole process from day one.
The foundational rule is that your metrics must be mapped to actual life cycle phases.
Like the phases you actually run.
Right. Plan, specify, verify, release, maintain, and retire. You cannot just pull metrics out of thin air based on what sounds impressive in a boardroom.
Yeah, vanity metric.
Exactly. You have to pull them from the work as it actually flows through your team's hands.
And crucially, you only choose KPIs that can be calculated without manual cleanup. This part really stood out to me.
Oh, it's huge.
If someone on your team has to spend 4 hours sweating in a spreadsheet, like scrubbing data and formatting cells, just to get ready for a weekly review meeting, that's not a metric.
No, it's not.
That is a chore.
It is a massive chore. And to prevent that chore, you have to assign exactly one owner for every source field.
Not a whole department.
Not a department, not a steering committee. One human being.
Wow, okay.
That creates a single version of the truth. If the data is missing or corrupted, there's no pointing fingers. You know exactly whose door to knock on.
I love that accountability. And you have to name these metrics in plain English too, right? Or whatever language your team actually speaks in the hallway.
Yes. The source makes a great point that calling something process efficiency is vague. It's corporate jargon that means nothing to the people actually doing the work.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Right. But calling it change control cycle time tells everyone exactly what is being measured.
But the rule I found most rigid and maybe the most controversial was this. Once you pick these KPIs, you freeze the list for at least a full quarter.
That freeze is totally non-negotiable in this framework.
Wait, but what if 2 weeks in, you realize the metric you chose is just completely useless? Or it's measuring the wrong behavior? Are we really supposed to just track garbage for 10 more weeks just for the sake of a role?
You are.
Really?
Yeah. And here is why stability trumps perfection in this phase. Think about trying to track your personal fitness.
Okay.
Week 1, you weigh yourself. Week 2, you measure your waist circumference. Week 3, you time how fast you can run a mile.
I see where this is going.
Right. If you don't freeze the metric, you never establish a baseline. Without a baseline, you have no trend line. You're just generating random numbers that tell you nothing about your actual progress.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's like trying to track your fitness, but every week you switch the roles. You have no trend line at all.
Exactly. A flawed metric measured consistently for 90 days will give you vastly more insight into your team's momentum than a perfect metric you only measured for a week.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it around the trend line.
And the source also adds a brilliant administrative rule to protect that trend line.
What's that?
You have to decide right now, before you even start tracking, who reviews exceptions and what a fix looks like.
Ah, so you don't argue about it later.
Right. If a number suddenly spikes, who has the authority to declare it a fluke or require an intervention? By deciding the rules of the game up front, you keep debates out of your review meetings.
Your meetings stay focused entirely on fixing the work rather than arguing about the validity of the data.
Exactly. You keep the focus purely on the work.
Okay, so the rules are set, the board is clear. Once you have that foundation, the very first thing any team anywhere wants to know is, how fast are we going?
Speed is always the most visceral metric. It's what management usually cares about most.
For sure.
But the source sets up a vital tug-of-war here. Looking at speed without looking at quality is a recipe for disaster.
Because you can push a terrible, broken product through a pipeline incredibly fast if you just stop checking to see if it works.
Precisely.
Let's look at the speed side of that tug-of-war first. The source gives us two main speed and flow KPIs.
The first one is change control cycle time.
Right. Mechanically, this is the number of days from when you open a change ticket to when you release it into the world in a validated state.
And they don't just put a blanket go fast mandate on this, which I appreciate.
Yeah, they tier the targets by risk.
Which prevents a massive bottleneck. You absolutely do not want a low-risk, simple typo fix waiting in the same bureaucratic queue as a high-risk core system overhaul.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It happens all the time. But by tiering the targets, say, aiming for 20 days on low-risk work, 30 days for medium, and 45 days for high-risk work, you create fast lanes for the easy stuff.
The second speed metric is validation lead time. This is a much narrower window, right?
Yes, it starts when the software build is actually ready for testing, and it ends when the executed evidence is officially approved.
And the healthy range the source provides here is 10 to 15 days.
Which is pretty tight. If your team is taking longer than 15 days just to validate something that is already built and sitting there, you have a behavioral problem, not a technical one.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Usually the bottleneck is the reviewers. These are people busy with their day jobs, and reviewing validation documents feels like, well, extra homework.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. They have no accountability to a service level agreement or SLA.
So the fixes the source provides for this are purely psychological. You set a simple SLA, sure, but then you create an aging view.
The aging view is fantastic.
It's basically a public dashboard that highlights any ticket sitting untouched for more than, say, 3 days.
The psychology of the aging view is incredibly powerful. Nobody wants to be the visible bottleneck.
Yeah, no one wants to be the guy holding everyone else up.
Exactly. When a ticket is hidden in an email inbox, it's easy to ignore. But when it's glowing red on a public dashboard showing that Dave in engineering has been sitting on it for 9 days.
Suddenly Dave finds the time to review it.
Magically. Combine that visibility with cross-training backup reviewers so Dave going on vacation doesn't paralyze your whole release cycle, and that 15-day lead time drops dramatically.
But as we said, speed is dangerous without the other side of the rope, quality and rework.
This is where we get back to that 100% trap we mentioned at the start.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The primary metric here is first pass yield.
Right.
This is the percentage of your test cases that pass on the very first try, without any errors. The source states emphatically that the healthy band for this is between 85 and 95%.
And this is so counterintuitive for most people.
I mean, shouldn't we want a 100% pass rate?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a 100% first pass yield is a blaring siren that your system is broken.
Wow.
If every single test passes the first time, you aren't actually testing anything meaningful. Your tests are too shallow for the risk involved. You aren't pushing the system hard enough to find its breaking points.
It's exactly like giving a high school senior a final exam where all the questions are basic addition.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
Like, sure, they got a perfect score, but you haven't actually measured their capability. You have no idea if they're ready for college.
A perfect score just proves the test was too easy.
So what happens if the yield is too low?
Well, on the flip side, If your first pass yield drops below 85%, it usually means your team's readiness is weak.
Like they're rushing.
Yeah, people are jumping the gun and starting tests before the testing environment is actually set up or before the user roles are configured correctly.
Ah, I see.
So that 85 to 95% sweet spot proves that your team is prepared, but your tests are still rigorous enough to catch those inevitable, complex edge case bugs.
The other two quality KPIs really support that sweet spot. You have the rework rate, which is the portion of tests you actually have to run again.
And the rule here is to keep it under 10%.
Right. And if it spikes, you don't just yell at the testers, you figure out why.
Exactly. Usually it points to confusing, poorly written instructions or bad test data.
And then there's the defect escape rate.
The ultimate measure of failure. How many bugs actually survived your testing process and made it out into the live environment where a user, or worse, a customer found them?
Ouch. The source normalizes this per 10 changes, so you can see the trend clearly, regardless of how busy a month is.
Which is super smart.
And the fix for a high escape rate isn't just do more testing. It's tightening the link between your initial requirements and your final tests, making sure you actually tested what the user actually needed.
So we've built a system that moves fast and catches complex bugs.
Yep.
But if you work in pharma or aviation or finance, trust me, it works. Isn't going to fly with a regulatory agency.
Definitely not.
How do you actually prove your quality to an auditor who wants to see the receipts?
The proof is everything, and proof relies on our third category, coverage and compliance.
The first KPI here is requirement coverage, meaning what share of your requirements has at least one test map to it.
Again, this is risk-tiered. High-risk items need 100% mapping. Medium risk should be 95% or higher.
But for low risk, you can justify skipping tests based on critical thinking.
Wait, really? Just skip them.
Yeah, this brings in a methodology the source advocates for called CSA, or Computer Software Assurance.
Okay.
Historically, highly regulated industries used a habit-based approach. Test absolutely everything, document absolutely everything, even if the feature had no impact on patient safety or product quality.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. CSA flips that. It mandates critical thinking. It asks you to focus your time, energy, and heavy documentation purely on the highest impact, highest risk areas, while taking a lighter approach to the rest.
But the metric that really forces that proof to materialize is traceability completeness. This measures the links across your entire chain of evidence.
Right. If I'm an auditor, I want to see the initial user requirement specification, the URS, linked directly to the design document, linked directly to the test script, linked directly to the final approval.
And the source points out that Validfor uses a traceability matrix to do this, but the genius part isn't the matrix itself.
No, it's making link creation a hard gate before approval.
It is a total hard stop. If a link in that chain is missing, the item cannot be approved.
The software literally prevents it. It completely eliminates that terrifying, chaotic scramble to assemble documentation 6 months later when the auditors announce they are arriving on Tuesday.
The proof is just built into the workflow.
Exactly.
Speaking of auditors arriving, the compliance KPIs keep the actual paperwork from becoming a nightmare. You've got the audit trail review on-time rate, where you're aiming for 95% or better completion by the due date.
That's pretty standard.
But the one I really want to highlight is the validation documentation right first time metric. The target here is 90% plus, and the source touches on a incredibly frustrating human element here.
Oh, the subjective reviewer. Anyone who has ever routed a document for approval knows exactly what this means.
Yes. When a document goes around for signatures, how many times does a reviewer reject it, not because the science is wrong or the math is incorrect, but purely because they want to debate style?
Oh, all the time.
Like, I wouldn't have used the word furthermore in this paragraph, or I prefer bullet points over numbered lists.
It is a massive drain on throughput.
Yeah.
You are resetting the entire cycle time for a grammar preference.
So annoying.
The source advocates aggressively for standardized templates, coaching, and automated pre-submission checks to eliminate this. You have to actively train reviewers that rejections are strictly for fixing intent, factual errors, or compliance gaps.
Not your personal style guide.
Exactly. They are not an avenue for satisfying personal stylistic preferences.
Yeah.
If you fix that specific human behavior, your right first-time metric skyrockets.
The final compliance metric is the observation rate per audit, which is trended by severity. And I love how the author frames this. You cannot review your audit observations as a raw number. You have to review them as a story.
A story? Yes. A single high-severity observation, say, A systemic failure in how you manage passwords is vastly more urgent and dangerous than a giant pile of minor formatting-style notes.
Right.
If you just look at a spreadsheet that says, we had 5 observations this year compared to 10 last year, you might pat yourself on the back thinking you're improving.
Because the number went down.
Right. But if those 5 are critical structural failures, your system is actually collapsing. The number lies, but the severity tells the truth.
So your system is fast, it's accurate, the auditors are completely satisfied. But at what cost? Perfect audits don't mean much if you are burning out your team and destroying your budget to achieve them.
Which leads us to the 4th category: throughput, cost, and debt.
The first KPI here is validation effort per change. This is the average number of hours your human beings are spending validating a release.
And the key lever to control this goes back to what we just discussed, ruthlessly applying those CSA critical thinking principles.
Right. Stop running low-value, habit-based tests just because we've always done it that way.
Cut the bloat so your team can spend their limited hours on high-impact problem solving.
But the metric that I think has the most profound universal application is validation debt. This is the raw count of overdue validations or periodic reviews sitting in the backlog.
Validation debt.
I just love that term, debt. It perfectly captures how neglected workflows behave. It is exactly like credit card debt.
It really is, because it accrues interest over time. Think about the mechanics of it. If you build a system and wait 6 months to validate it, you don't just have a backlog item. You have a massive liability.
How so?
Well, the original developers have moved on to other projects. The institutional knowledge of why they built it a certain way has faded.
Oh, that makes sense.
A validation process that would have taken 10 hours if done immediately might now take 30 hours, simply because people have to reverse engineer their own forgotten logic.
And to combat that, the source recommends a very specific psychological strategy for paying down this workflow debt. You assign an owner, and you run a weekly or quarterly burn down.
But you don't start with the biggest, hardest validations.
Right. You deliberately target and close the trivial, easy blockers first.
It's the snowball method of debt repayment applied to corporate compliance. By clearing the small, easy tasks first, the team watches the total number of overdue items drop rapidly.
Momentum becomes visible.
Exactly. Morale goes up. The source notes that teams can often have their validation debt in just a few cycles once they shine a spotlight on it and attack it with this snowball method.
Okay, so we have the entire framework. We have 13 KPIs covering speed, quality, coverage, compliance, and cost.
We do.
But here is the age-old problem. How do you actually get a massive, stubborn organization, or even just yourself, to adopt a 13 KPI framework without launching a 6-month, multi-million-dollar IT integration project that makes everyone miserable?
This is where the source transitions from high-level theory to a literal week-by-week playbook, a 30-day dashboard challenge.
I love a good sprint.
Week 1 is all about decisions. There is no coding, no software. You just get in a room, pick your data sources, pick your single owners, freeze the KPI list, and agree on plain English names for the fields.
And week 2 is data. You build a single table. But here is the critical mechanism that makes this work. You backfill 2 recent quarters of data.
You do not start from zero.
Right. By backfilling historical data, on day 1 of launching your new dashboard, you already have a real actionable trend line to look at. You aren't waiting 3 months for the chart to populate.
That is so key. Week 3 is math. You build the actual KPIs, test the formulas with sample records to make sure the math isn't broken, and publish the target risk bands, like those 20, 30, and 45-day cycle time targets we established earlier.
And week 4 is the ritual.
The ritual.
So what does this all mean? How does a meeting ritual lock this all into place?
You start meeting once a week, you review the outliers, agree on actions, and track the deltas. The golden rule here is to keep it incredibly short.
Tracking deltas, not status, is the absolute secret sauce of this 30-day plan.
It is.
Why are deltas so much more important than status?
Because status meetings are static, and frankly, they are soul-crushing.
Oh, they really are.
A status meeting is a manager saying, our cycle time is currently 35 days.
Yeah.
Everyone nods. Okay, great. What do we do with that?
Oh.
Exactly. A delta meeting is entirely about momentum. It sounds like this. Our cycle time was 40 days. We implemented cross-training for backup reviewers. Now it's 35 days. We are moving in the right direction.
Deltas focus the team's energy entirely on the impact of their actions, rather than just forcing them to admire the current state of the problem.
And the dashboard design they recommend reflects that bias toward action perfectly.
Yeah, it is not a cluttered mess of a million pie charts.
No, it's one simple view. Current value, the target, last quarter's value, and a trend arrow pointing up or down.
Plus, they add 2 spotlight cards that physically force management to act.
Right.
One card showing the biggest mover, highlighting who improved the most, and one card showing the largest gap to target, highlighting exactly where the bleeding is worst.
It removes all ambiguity. And the source points out that in a purpose-built system like Validfor, these KPIs are mapped directly to the modules that own the work.
Oh, that's smart.
Change management owns cycle time. Testing owns first-pass yield. If a number is glowing red on your dashboard, you're only one click away from the actual specific tickets that are causing the problem.
There is no hunting through 5 disparate software systems to find out why the number is red.
Exactly.
It's brilliant. It turns a static reporting tool into a dynamic management tool. And that really brings us back to you listening right now.
Yeah.
Whether you are managing a pharmaceutical validation lifecycle, leading a global software development team, or honestly just trying to organize a massive personal project, this 13 KPI framework and this 30-day sprint is a masterclass in separating signal from noise.
It proves that a truly good metric doesn't just measure the work you've already done. It actively shapes the behavior of the people doing the work tomorrow.
If you freeze your metrics to build a trend line, if you balance speed with quality, if you ruthlessly enforce single ownership to avoid data chores, and if you focus your meetings on momentum rather than status, you stop drowning in data and you start actually steering the ship.
This raises an important question, though, and it's something I want to leave you with.
Okay.
We talked earlier about that first-pass yield metric and how a 100% success rate is actually a massive warning sign that your tests are too easy and you aren't finding the real risks.
Right, the 100% trap.
So look at the metrics you are currently tracking in your own life or your own career. Look at the things you are most proud of.
Oh.
If you are consistently hitting a 100% success rate on your current personal dashboard, are you actually achieving perfection? Or have you just designed a measurement system that actively incentivizes you to avoid doing anything difficult?
Wow. If you never fail, you're probably just playing the wrong game. It's something to think about the next time you look at a perfectly green dashboard.